Hello and welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads. At the moment, it's just one dad. Sean will be joining us here in just a second, but we're at episode number 203, and today I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. We haven't created a series, but we might as well. This is today's talk with Suzy Miller is an extension of conversations that we've had with Katie Asher and their discussion around the telepathy tapes and the world of communication that's a little different than I think most people are used to. So listen up for today's conversation and have your mind open, because today's talk is going to be mind-blowing. So if your mind's not open yet, it will be as soon as we're done. So stay tuned for another episode here of Just Two Dads. Yep, you're right. So, and we're also noticing we have a little bit of technical difficulties. Sean will be joining us here in just a second. We started this podcast about 4 years ago. Sean and I, who are financial services professionals, realized as parents of children with special needs issues that there are a lot of things that the average family has access to, and special needs families are often left out of the conversation, or they don't realize that they have access to certain resources. And so we thought we'd start talking to amazing professionals who serve the special needs community. And we've been doing this now for 4 years. This is, again, episode number 203. And like everything in life, when it comes to families of special needs, family members, we take life as it happens. We are not, I said to Suzy, our guest a minute ago, that we don't polish. We're not overly produced, because that's not how life actually is. So Sean will be joining us, hopefully soon, as my earpiece falls out. Again, perfect example of life happening as it happens. So we're going to get into today's conversation. Suzy Miller, for those of you who have had the amazing pleasure and benefit of listening to the telepathy tapes by Kai Dickens, we have had Katie Asher on. In fact, our last episode, we had Katie and her son Houston on. Katie was featured in the telepathy tapes, and Suzy as well, and the talk tracks afterwards. And so I highly encourage you, if you have not listened to the telepathy tapes. By the way, the number one, it's won, Webby Awards, and it's been the number one podcast. Even Joe Rogan acknowledged that the telepathy tapes were something of significance. And there's so many folks whose lives have been impacted by listening to those. And so today's guest, Suzy Miller, we call her, she's an educator and a visionary, and has been working in the area of what they call psi abilities. And we're going to get into that discussion here. So thank you for joining us. We know you have choices of podcasts that you can listen to, and hopefully you'll find some value in what we talk about today. Share it with your friends and family, anybody that you know, especially if you know somebody who has a family member who's been diagnosed with autism disorder along the spectrum. It used to be, Suzy, what? It used to be 1 in 10,000, and now it was 1 in 36 like a year or two ago, and it feels like it's actually even less than that now. Is that right?
I think last week, I think I heard 1 in 31. So
I heard that as well.
Yeah,
I heard that as well. So and for folks who deal with that, and Sean's son is on the autism spectrum, and so this is a conversation that he's going to love when he joins us at some point here. But it's fascinating, because a lot of times, and I think in the course of history, people who have had some sort of disability, physical or mental or psychological, have been discounted or have been discarded. And we're missing an opportunity, because it really is a blessing for those folks who deal with autism. So today's conversation, we're going to kind of dive into that. So Suzy Miller, welcome to Just One Dad, to our Just Two Dads episode.
Thanks for having me.
Your background and history is fascinating, and you've written a book. We're going to throw it up here on the screen for those who are watching. It's called Awesomeism: A New Way to Understand the Diagnosis of Autism. Tell us about your practice. You've been accessing this new way of. It's new to a lot of folks today, but it's not new to you. A way of accessing this diagnosis and really what it means to the individual and to families. And so talk about a little bit about where you got exposed to the world of autism and your expanded consciousness, if you will, around that.
Yeah, I was a pediatric speech language pathologist before I was a multidimensional seer and telepathic communicator. So it was, and I graduated with my master's degree in 1986. And as you were saying earlier, like, back in 86, it was 1 in 10,000. There were no children really diagnosed with autism. And so I had no education in it. There was no awareness of it. But I did have a thriving speech pathology practice. And so I was taking new clients all the time. And it just so happened that I received a client on my caseload that did have this diagnosis. And I walked in, Brian, like from the perspective of, okay, I'm going to go in. I love working with kids. I want to build a relationship with this child. That's what I knew worked as far as supporting communication. And when I went in, this kid was marching back and forth in the daycare center, and he's going, "It's the millennium. It's 1999." And I'm going, okay. And my speech pathology brain was going, "This is a freaky little kid. It's like, what's going on?" But the child walked right up to me. Riley is his name. He walked right up to me. He looked me directly in the eyes, which we know now that most kids diagnosed with autism do not make direct eye contact. But I didn't know that at the time. And he looked me right in the eye and he said, "Master." And when he said "master," I'm going, "What are you talking about? Like, what's going on? What's happening?" But I felt something happen in my body when he said that. And so I took him back into back of the daycare center to work with him. And as he's walking around and not feeling it felt to me like he didn't want to be in the room with me. I didn't know what to do because I didn't have any training in autism. So
Sure.
I just sat down with my back against the door and I just thought, okay, I'm just going to give him time to settle down. And as he starts to, as he's walking in the room and still saying it's the millennium, all of a sudden I see what I now know was like a body of light that was floating above his physical body. And I'm rubbing my eyes and I'm going, I shouldn't have gone out last night. It's like I'm thinking all these things. And
Sure.
then, but it was clear as day. I'd never seen anything like that before. And so the light body above his physical body, the only connection between the two was this little tail that hung off the foot of the light body and it hung down into his heart. That's what I was seeing. I had no idea what that was. But then because I couldn't get it to go away, the visual, I asked in my head, what am I seeing? Like, what the heck is happening? What's going on?
Sure.
And I hear this little boy's voice, which sounded an awful lot like Riley's voice, the kid who's saying it's the millennium, it's 1999. I hear this voice in my head, and he said, "That's my light body. You're here to put my light body back into my physical body."
Ooh, chills. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I was like, I had no idea what he meant. I had no idea why he thought I could do that. But what I did know is that my life had just changed beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I was going to be going in a whole new direction. I just didn't know what that was. And he basically took me through a year-long process where he's telling me, he's telepathically communicating, coming to me and telling me what to do to support his integration. And I asked a lot of questions over that year.
Sure.
And at the end of that year, he had gone from being a kind of a unreliable speaker, like wrote sentences or wrote phrases like it's the millennium.
Yeah.
That turned into the ability to fully communicate, verbally
Wow.
communicate. So it
What
was
year was this,
mind-boggling.
Susie? I'm sorry to interrupt you. What year
No,
was that?
that was 1999.
It was not. So it really was 1990. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
So that's what 26 years ago now. So, and so in essence, you over that year you did that. You combined the light body with his physical body enough to allow him to communicate.
yeah.
Keep going. This is amazing. I'm still so fascinated, and I've heard a bit about this story, and I've heard you speak a little about this, and still hearing it come today live, I feel again. I feel it in my own body. I can feel how
Well,
over.
it's interesting that you say that because I think that what I've learned over these last 26 years now working with tens, I mean, well over what, 15,000 families, I think it is now. It's like, number one, every one of these kids in the last 26 years is telepathic. Every single one of these kids, when you tap into that part of them that knows themselves, they also know what they need and they also know what helps with their integration. But one of the things, and the more we tap into that and ask, you know,
Yeah,
assume that that competence is there and ask, the more we can facilitate and support that integration. And then over the years, what happened is, more and more of these kids were coming. And it just so happened that at one point, it all felt like they were all talking at once at one point, like almost like it was a collective group, right?
wow,
And when
yeah,
it became collective, I started asking questions that every parent has when they come to see somebody like me. Like they would, questions like, I just want to be of support to my kid. I can't telepathically communicate with them, or I don't know what they need. And I just need to know where to start. So I would start asking those bigger questions that every parent asks to the collective consciousness of the children. And they would say things like one of the things that was very first is, anything that you want to do for us, you have to also do for yourself. So
wow,
if you're trying to help us manage our emotions, let's say, then you need to learn how to manage that emotional state within yourself, right?
wow,
If you're trying to help us regulate in our bodies, then we need to look at the places where, every human being on this planet gets dysregulated at one
sure,
time or another in different ways.
sure,
um, they would say things like, you look at us and you see us as disassociated or disconnected from our bodies. But how many human beings on this planet are disconnected from themselves in one way or another for very good reasons? I mean, life is challenging,
for sure, for
So
sure,
they weren't blaming or shaming anybody. But what they were saying is, as we understand that this is in all of us, not just in us, we're just a reflection of that, right?
sure. I was going to ask you if it seems. I mean, I don't even think that most people even know how to ask what they need, or
Right.
we have inhibitions that prevent us from saying I need this. And I feel like that's probably the majority for neurotypical folks. They have that inhibition. So is it that these kids that you've been dealing with don't have those inhibitions, don't have a lot of those restrictions? I know that was talked about to some degree in the telepathy tapes, but is that the case? They don't have the boundaries that we have in our communication to
The
some degree.
the way I see it is that this population is coming in and they almost like they they function in a field of oneness. Like they function in a field of oneness. So if we and what does that mean? It means that all aspects of everything are in the mix, you might say. Nothing
Mm,
is left out. So if someone functions in the field of oneness, doesn't it make sense that if you and I are one, then of course I can read your thoughts, and of course I can know what you're feeling, and of course I can even maybe see parts of you that you yourself can't see, right?
Wow.
And so from my vantage point, and talking to these kids for all this time, they just kept saying, it's like we're a leap in evolution, we're the next step, we're functioning in oneness. You all have been conditioned to separation, right? And
Amazing.
so here we come, and we're going to show you all the places where you're stuck in separation, not to punish you or not to make you feel bad or wrong about yourselves, but to show you really what needs to be loved back into wholeness, what needs to be loved back into oneness, right? And so
It's
once we
amazing.
understand this, man, things really start shifting pretty quickly.
I, I so first of all, right, there's going to be some emotion in all of this as we're having this conversation because of amount of overwhelm when you think about this. When I think about that kind of communication, and again, I see this as a level of consciousness,
Yes.
how impacted and in the world would be if we could all tap into this. And I think for those of us who don't have the ability to communicate telepathically, for me anyways, the first thought I have is, I want to, I want to have access to this. How do I do this? Like, this is because it is world changing, and it is mind blowing because it's so far outside of what we encounter on a daily basis. Did you feel that as well as you were, as the world was opening up for you
Oh, it was
in this
so.
manner?
Yes, and in 1999, when there weren't as many people having this conversation, it was completely overwhelming. I mean, it was a challenge to my worldview. It was a challenge to my nervous system. It was a challenge to all kinds of things at that time. And there were a few people to have a conversation about it, but not necessarily specifically in relationship to kids diagnosed with autism. So yeah, so I have a lot of empathy when I'm talking to parents and professionals now who are being blown wide open by these kids. You
Yeah.
know, I I really do have a lot of empathy and a lot of personal experience of just what that takes. I'm not saying it's easy by any stretch of the imagination, but what I do know firsthand is that every person on this planet is innately telepathic. We are, it's just one of our God-given rights as a human being, right? We are telepathic, right? The problem is that we've lived in separation. We've been so conditioned out of our innate gifts. I mean, if you take any 2-year-old or 3-year-old and you talk to them about what they see and hear and know, how mommy or daddy feels in any given moment, they know all of that. they're
Amazing.
they're also connected in that way, but as we get conditioned to fit in and to quote unquote be normal,
Uh, yeah.
um, then we start just layering all kinds of other focal points on top of our innate capacity. And the kids on the spectrum, to me, they're kind of like coming in and they're going, yeah, no, we're going back to the way we're meant to be, right? And it might be a little bit uncomfortable to get through those layers, but
Yeah.
that's what we're going to do. Um,
Yeah.
and I've watched it. I've watched so many parents and professionals become telepathic.
Well,
Um,
and it's funny because you said we all have it, and yet there were so many people like, oh, I don't have it, I don't have it, and yet we we when we ask questions like, have you ever walked down the street and sort of felt like somebody was watching you, in a way that's tapping into that, right? Or
exactly.
parent, I was going to pick up the phone to call somebody and they called me. Like,
Yes.
it's lucky you had the same thought at the same time, but in a way you do because you're communicating, right? Those experiences are along the same lines as what you're talking about, correct?
Yeah, and those are all experiences of oneness as well. If
Right.
there's no separation between you and I, then I know when you're calling.
Right.
It's like, and most people have those experiences, maybe not on purpose, but they just spontaneously kind of happen. If
And I
we
think our tendency is just to sort of like, ah, wave it off like it's the
exactly.
conditioning, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we negate it, and if
Yeah.
we instead of negating it, if we would kind of be curious and just kind of go, "Well, what was that?" "Well, that was interesting," or
Yeah.
"I'd like that to happen again."
Yeah.
The likelihood is that it will happen again. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I've been talking about this with really almost everybody I talk to. I spoke to my aunts who are in their 90s,
Yeah.
and that one's 90, one's 92, and they're amazing human beings, and they're active, and they're fascinated by this whole thing, and they're like, oh yeah, we know. My aunt would show a picture like we showed up at the opera together and separately wearing the exact same outfit,
Yes.
and they're like,
Yeah.
how does that kind of thing happen?
Yes.
Same
Yeah,
color scheme and everything. And they're like, oh
right.
yeah, we have this all the time. And yet natural tendency just to say, oh, it's just coincidence or it's just happenstance as opposed to, when I hear this, I'm like, oh, can I purposefully do that? Can I put myself in a place where I can actually make that happen? Because I'm fascinated by this.
Right, right. Well, and my take is that, if it's already there, it's innately in us. We're just having to kind of peel off some of the layers that says that it can't be or it doesn't exist. And
Yeah.
that's one of the beautiful things about the telepathy tapes right now. It's just kind of opened up this conversation everywhere because part of the reason why, I mean, every parent I've talked to over the last 26 years says that they have had some kind of deep connection with their child or some kind of telepathic experience. But because it's not a mainstream conversation, that's usually the reason why we kind of put it in our back pockets and say, I'm not going to fit in if I start talking about these things. And I know that firsthand because when I talked about it in 99, people were like, are you nuts? Like, are
I
you, like, what's wrong with you?
was
Um,
just going to ask that question, how
yeah,
that impacted you initially. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it was challenging at first because I was just so blown away and so excited to be learning that, this child that I was working with and the ones that followed, like I saw them through one lens, but that's not who they were at all. They were much more than I perceived them to
Mm.
be. And so if that was true for them, my where my mind was going was that true for me? Am I more than
Wow.
I perceive myself to be? Are other people more than they perceive themselves to be? But when I would talk about it, at least initially, especially among speech pathologists, they were like, no, that's not true. They need to be quote unquote fixed. There's something wrong, and you're there to support them. And I'm going, I don't think that's what's happening. I think I'm there so they can support me,
Right.
so that I can open to more. And over time, I did find people. There was a woman who was a friend of mine who was going to the Barbara Brennan Hands of Light, which was basically an energy healing school.
Mm.
And she was able to explain to me some of the things that I was seeing. And then my children also went to a Waldorf school at the time. And so there was some friendly folks there too that I could have conversations about. But in all honesty, the reason I kept going with this, Brian, is because everything that the kids told me came to pass. Like
Ah,
if they told me something, it, and if I told their parents this, it worked. And if it
interesting.
hadn't, I would have probably stopped just like everybody else.
Sure.
But But yeah, it was a combination of having the right people come in at the right time and the kids um, being willing to build a relationship with me too. And that
Sure.
relationship
Well,
had to be built on trust, right?
and I was going to say they had to have a sense that you were an open and willing, if you will, open and willing participant, right? Otherwise, they'd be communicating with everybody, right? But not everybody's open to it. So they
Well,
had to have some trust in you.
and I think that that's true. I mean, I see that in Kai Dickens too. I've had a lot of conversations with her about that. It's like, I do think that this population does have an innate sense of where to go first, you might say, like where to start. And if you had asked me if I was open to this as a pediatric speech language, if you had told me what was coming, I would go, no, not open, you know. So there was a part of me that they could see that was open that I didn't even know was open.
Sure.
And I do think that these kids have that innate ability, and they're very systematic about opening different people at different times to bring this out into the world. And wow, they hit the jackpot with Kai because, you know, she's in her trust of them, she's opened it up to a lot of people to, yeah, to be able
Yeah.
to be changed by them as well.
Yeah. If you're just listening to us, we're talking to Suzy Miller, who is as a pediatric speech language therapist, but really now educator and a consultant. And let's talk about that a little bit because Suzy, people seek you out now, and talk about your practice. And by the way, if you want to go to Suzy's website, it's SuzyMiller.com. It's SuzyMiller.com. If you're not seeing us on video, but you're hearing our podcast, SuzyMiller.com. There's a lot of information on the website and a lot about Suzy and her practice and the things that she offers. But for those who have not had that experience, share with us how did you then turn this into a broader, really sort of a broader practice and things that you offer families.
Yeah, so when I wrote Awesomeism in 2008, and when I wrote it, I really wrote it for my own sanity, if I'm honest. It's like I just needed to be able to like write the experience down, say what I knew, and just kind of put it out into the world. And it's one of those moments where you put it out on social media and you put it and you kind of go, oh gosh, here it comes, you know. But what I was blown away by is that what happened is I put it out there, and within hours, Brian, people from all over the world were reaching out and they were going, I've had telepathic conversations with my kid. I knew my kid was more than other people perceived him to be. I knew there was more to dysregulation and flapping and stimming and all these other kinds of things. And I was like, I was blown away. I thought I was having this isolated experience. And I think that that's what's true for a lot of parents, they and professionals. We've all thought we were having these isolated experiences, but now we know, no, it's like it's happening all over the place.
Yeah.
So once that happened, people kept asking me if I would train them or if I would support them in some way. So I started something called the Awesomeism Practitioner Process, which we did for several years. I personally trained like 300 people. Every single one of them became telepathic. Many of them are out there speaking in the world right now, about their connections with their kids and what their kids have to share with humanity. So that was just brilliant and fun and interesting. And it was very natural and organic. And from there, you know, private sessions and other kind of classes came about. At one point, I stopped doing the practitioner process. We're going back to it here pretty soon. But it was so natural and organic. I don't know how else to say it. It's just people were asking for support in certain ways, and then we would create that support, you know, based on what we knew.
Yeah.
And I could hear the kids laughing in the background the whole time, like, "You think this is your plan, but this is really our plan," like, it's like, I know who I work for, Brian. It's like, yeah, so I just yeah, so
I mean, it's kind of you're you're one of the few, I think, the few people in the world, right, that has this this gift, if you will, to you're like almost like a people who channel spirits in some to some degree, right? You have
yeah.
been given a gift to communicate and be a megaphone for these kids who didn't have a voice. I feel, is that, do you feel that? I mean, I also got to be the weight of that responsibility as well, right? To some degree, you feel
Well,
that?
it's yes, I definitely felt that at the very beginning in particular because there weren't as many other people who were openly telepathically communicating with the kids and saying that they are. I mean, there's a lot of people who do that kind of work now, but initially, I think the weight of it also was that I was a pediatric speech language pathologist, and
Oh,
so I didn't want to be saying or hearing anything from the children that I was telepathically communicating with that wasn't accurate or wasn't true. So, one of the things that I put in place initially, and still to this day, if there's a way in which a child can give me feedback, even like a smile, a yes, no on a board, a something, I'll always go back to them and say, "This is all the information that you're giving me, right? I'm giving this to your parent or to other people out in the world. Is that accurate?
uh,
Is that true? Is that accurate?" And and I'm so glad that I did it that way because I think
sure.
that's exactly what allowed me to fine tune my skill. I wasn't looking to be right or wrong. I wasn't looking to be a telepathic communicator even. I was just interested in this consciousness that was clearly part of this population being able to be here, being able to be out in the world. And
Yeah.
the more that we collaborated like that, the more the information was crystal clear, so to speak.
Mm.
And it worked. Again, if it didn't work, I would have been out a long time ago.
Sure,
Yeah,
sure. And
yeah.
yeah, that's I'm again that's fascinating. So here's, I'm going to ask a very sophomoric question, if you will, or pedantic question. But and I think people think this when they know somebody has got the ability, psi abilities, as they say, whether
Mhm.
you're somebody who, you know, psychic or whatever. Can't, is it always, is sort of, is your antenna always on once you tap into the world of telepathy? Like, can you, like, can we communicate telepathically now, or is it specific to a particular case? Like, how does that work?
When I first got, I'll say, blown open like that, I I could not shut it off for a little bit. Like, I
Okay.
was seeing things and hearing things all the time, and that's part of what did my nervous system in. It was just
Oh,
too much
sure,
information. But
sure.
in retrospect, it also gave me really deep insight into the fact that these kids' antennas are open all day,
To
every
everything. Yeah,
and this is why their nervous systems don't do so well. This is why it's a little challenging to regulate. So, in retrospect, I'm glad I had that experience. But now, no, it's turned on and turned off at will. And I would never just make that connection without somebody asking, quite honestly.
sure. That makes sense.
Because some people are really ready for that kind of connection and other people aren't. And for a lot of people, it can be deeply emotional when you make a telepathic connection. And it's emotional because you're entering the field of oneness. You're entering, at the very least, you're entering a heart to heart communication.
Sure.
And
And
that
I think,
energy was covered up, right?
Yeah.
Then when you start communicating in that way, you're starting to open something up in somebody that I personally believe we have to have permission to do that.
I
Yeah.
was gonna say, otherwise it feels like could be feeling like a violation to some degree, right? And I
No,
think that's what
yes,
people fear.
yes. And for me, when you look at a population of individuals who have not been seen or heard or valued or had their own voice in the world, I don't care whether we're communicating with somebody, how we're communicating with somebody. I want to honor and value that, right? I want to honor that information no matter how it's coming through. I don't
Sure,
want to assume that I have it right just because I'm tapping in at a certain place. So
sure,
I feel like this is one of those things that as people are telepathically communicating with these kids out in the world, it's a good thing to have like a balance and check system of some sort um, directly with them, because why would we want to negate somebody's voice that's coming to the surface just because it's coming in a particular way?
sure. That
Yeah.
makes it makes so much sense. And it's funny, when I first listened to telepathy tapes, I thought, in a way, this legitimizes a lot of what I think traditional society considered to be sort of woo-woo or
Yeah.
hack, or people who have psychic abilities or the ability to communicate with people who have passed on, all that, where we've discarded those folks. In a way, this legitimizes for those who really have the talent.
Mhm.
And do you encounter a lot of, again, a lot of that part of the population, folks who then feel like they can communicate with spirits and other things outside of your traditional practice?
Um, yes, and it's a fine line, right? Because
Sure.
within the field of oneness, we can connect with everything and anything, right? And but sometimes it is true that sometimes people are connecting with something almost as a see me, hear me, value
Mhm.
me. That's different than connecting with a population, whether it's the autistic population or whether it's the population of um, energies or individuals who have passed, to to be in service to hear their voice.
Ah,
Those are
yeah,
those are two different things, and one comes from a place of maybe of our own wounding, and we all have it. We
sure.
all want to be seen and heard and valued. So there's that side of it. But then there's also, when we work through that, we get to this place where we truly want these voices to be heard in the world, because we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that those voices heard are going to elevate humanity overall, right?
Sure.
That's service, right? That's the
Yeah,
difference between service to self and service to the
to
whole.
others.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Again, we're talking with Suzy Miller. I the multi-dimensional communication, right? That's what we how we reference it to some degree. And again, if I'm closed to the idea of multi-dimensional communication, how do I get opened up to it? And I think that's a question that I think people would say, like, "Oh, that's fascinating. I'm not sure if but how is there a way to I guess intentionally begin to open up to the possibility of being tapped into the concept of oneness?"
I think it's easier than we might think.
Huh.
The moment that, you just asked that question, it's like, I'm interested in this, I'm curious.
Yeah.
The moment that you've kind of thrown that out there and said, I want to know more, I want to open up, all of a sudden, people start talking to you about things that they didn't talk to you about before. Books start falling off shelves. You have a conversation or you get introduced to a kid that can open you up. I mean, I think that we negate how powerful we actually are. We think that there has to be some process or some means of bringing ourselves back to what we innately are. And that's what's so brilliant about things like the telepathy tapes or podcasts like this, conversations like this, because what it does is it has people asking more questions.
Yeah,
The
for
more
sure.
you're asking a question, the more that oneness wants to fill that void and answer that question, right?
Yeah,
So I think that curiosity is that's the key. I mean, if we can just be curious, and maybe we're used to going, oh yeah, that doesn't exist. I'm not going there. But just for a moment, if we just kind of go, well, what if, what if these things are possible? That in and of itself opens such a big space for new information to come into. And I tell people all the time, instead of feeling like we have all the answers or that we just shut things down, let's ask questions. The more
sure.
questions we have, the more answers will come from places outside of what we've already known. Yeah,
Sure. It feels like, as communication is, it feels like a language. It feels like the more that you're in practice, the more fluent you become.
exactly.
Is that right? Is that
Yeah,
conceptually?
because in 99, I could not have this conversation with you, Brian,
I'm
to
sure.
save myself. I mean, it was, I, I, it was like this, it's like you couldn't get it out, right?
Yeah,
Now, over time, over integration time, you might say, it becomes more fluid. It becomes just a matter of fact, right? I mean, I have a good friend who says to me all the time, she goes, Suzy, you're such a grounded person, and yet you talk about things that are so far out. And it's like, and you make them sound just normal, right? And I was like, well, but they are normal, and they become normal for each one of us the more we allow it to just be, right? To just
sure,
be.
sure.
Yeah.
I feel like, athletes who are in the flow, or even, I will say, even in my own life, when I first listened to telepathy tapes, and I was sharing it with others, we're this sort of in conversation. So many areas of my life began to really flow, and the more that I started focusing on those things and less in the conversation about the
Yeah.
telepathy, the less in flow I was feeling to some degree. It's like I
Right.
realized that as we're having this conversation, the more that
Yeah.
I think about this,
Yeah.
right?
You are tapping into a field of oneness. And when you tap into
Yeah,
that field of oneness, which is the collective consciousness of these kids and other fields as well, but they really represent it, then the rest of your life experience starts moving into oneness as well.
yeah. I really did feel that way. I also remember when and this is definitely not about me, but I'm so fascinated. I could talk to you
Love it.
for days about this. I got my MBA at Pepperdine University here in
Oh,
California,
yeah.
and the first class that we were required to take was called Human Behavior in Organizations.
Yeah.
And my professor at the time had us talk about, study and write a paper on those things that were sort of inexplicable by Western thought.
Yeah.
Things like astral projection. I wrote my paper on astral projection. I kept
Oh,
thinking like, oh,
wow.
I wish
That's
I
amazing. Yeah.
wish I could do it. Right.
Yeah.
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 And partially the idea was, when you're a manager in a corporation, sometimes you get a feeling, or we call it intuition. You get a feeling about something or some person, and we tend to discount it. And the idea was, if you're going to go into the area of business and get your MBA, first thing is be open to these things that we can't explain by Western Aristotelian, I guess that's the word, um, thought process.
Right.
And now, as we're talking about this, I realize Professor Richard Reardon, I'll never forget him, so impactful, because it made me start thinking about those things that we couldn't really explain, as you're talking about, grounded, yet talking about things that are
Yeah.
out there.
And I think the more we explore that, the more we have curiosity about those things that, I mean, human beings like to feel safe. They like to stay with what they know. But
Sure.
unfortunately, that's not what keeps us safe. What keeps us safe is we expand and we grow into who we are. I mean, Brian, I've had some experiences with these kids that I still have a file that says can't explain it, don't know what just happened, but it's in the file and at some point it will be explained to me, right? It's
Wow.
like I'll understand it. But you were talking about like astral projection. Doesn't it make sense that if you're locked into a body that doesn't function the way you want it to function or on command, that you're going to develop other skill sets so that you can travel beyond that body so that that body's no longer a limitation, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So, like, I've had kids literally astral project or what I would consider like bilocate, like, and sit in my sit in my room, sit in my
Wow.
conversation with me, see them as all like this ghosty looking. I had a kid the other day I had just met. It was a brand new client. We were telepathically communicating. He was a partial speller, so we were verifying different things. And during the during the telepathic communication, he said to me, "Can I come visit you?" And I did not say that like to his mom. I just said, was telling him the things he was telling me to, "Can I come visit you?" And I just like, of course. I mean, it's like we're one.
Sure. Yeah.
How are we going to not? And I just kind of left it and we did the rest of the session. And then I went into my kitchen afterwards to get a snack or whatever. I opened the refrigerator and this little kid is standing between me and the refrigerator.
Oh my gosh.
I could see him clear as day, not as dense as me, but, and I was like kind of going, and I've had so many experiences where kids or groups of kids will come in and they'll talk to me about certain things. Or if I would say this out loud to people out in the world, you know, especially before even 2 years ago, people would be going, "What is wrong with her?" It's like, what is going on? But
Yeah.
but nevertheless, I had one little boy that he was little at the time. I've known him for a long time. But I was sitting on a bench with his mom and he, had his hood up. He's walking around doing the things that he likes to do, and he walked over to me sitting on the bench and he just grabbed my hand. He just, like he was going to shake my hand. Well, when he grabbed my hand, like my consciousness went right out of my body. And the next thing I know, we're walking through a door together.
Oh my gosh.
And this kid he's a speller. He was a speller. He's speaking now, but at the time he was a speller. And I hadn't heard his voice before. But we're walking through this room, this door, and there's an art studio there. He's an artist. He loves art in this world. And he's talking. I'm hearing him speak in his voice. And he's saying, "This is why I'm an artist. This is why I asked my mom to send my paintings to different people. This is what's happening." Um, and I'm going, okay, and just, along for the ride, I guess is the best way to say it. And then all of a sudden he says to me, "My mom wants you." And he verbally says it. And then he starts letting go of my hand. He just starts releasing the pressure on my hand. And as he does, my consciousness comes back into my body. And I'm like in slow motion. And I turn and I look at his mom. His mom knows I'm a little different, so she wasn't blown away. But she looks at me and she goes, "What are you doing?" She goes, "You and Jackson are just standing there holding hands. You haven't spoken like in the last couple minutes." And I heard her, and all I could say is, "Can't right now. I'll be back." And
Oh
I
my gosh.
And I turned my head and I went back and I said, Jackson, we need to go back to your mom. We need to go back and, you know, and he let go of my hand and I was right back. And he as he let go of my hand, he's with his hoodie walking around in the grass. And his mom goes, what the heck just happened? You know, she just happened to be somebody I could say, this is what just
Yeah,
happened, you know. But again, it's like the questions to ask are really like, if we are all one, if this is opening us to oneness, what might we be capable of? What
for sure.
what is that like? What is it like to experience that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Again, two things. First of all, I literally was thinking before you told the story, I'd love to hear an example of one of those things that you can't explain. So
that was,
there's
yeah,
already an example of
yeah.
oneness right there. And the second, I think, is that I think a lot of people would like to know how amazing the world would be if we could all have some
Mhm.
access to this. This has
Yeah,
been a fascinating conversation. I can We say this every episode, honestly, Suzy, that the hour goes by so quickly
it does.
that, and especially when it's such an amazing subject as you've been sharing with us, you are, and I'm going to put up on the screen. This is, I could talk to you again for hours. This is so fascinating to me. And it's a subject matter that I've clearly had some access to,
Yeah,
and I continue to sort of push it away. And yet,
here it
I want to have
comes.
more of it.
Here it comes.
Bring it on. I'm happy. I'm happy to be a receiver and to be participating in all this. SuzyMiller.com, SuzyMiller.com. Before I let you go, because again, we could keep going, and I wish that maybe we'll get a chance to have another conversation again in another time. But I'm going to ask the question that Sean asks at the end of every episode, and I'm fascinated to hear this. And I loved your pre-answer to this. So I don't know the answer for anybody who wants to know. I don't know the answer to what Suzy's going to say, but our ability to change the world is often related to our ability and willingness to change ourselves. So share with us an example of some strong thought or conviction that you once held dearly that you've let go of, and you no longer have that conviction. What would that be?
I I used to believe that people were what we saw, that people were
Huh.
exactly as we perceive them to be. And I've let go of that because what I know is now is we only see what we see with, right? So
Wow.
yeah. So I was seeing through a certain lens, and Riley and all these other kids opened me up to a completely different lens. And I realized it was me. They were the same all the time. I was just seeing them as wrong or broken or in need of something prior. And as I worked with that within myself, then I start seeing more and more and more of what they have to offer. So
So that is so. Can you say it one more time? Because that is so powerful. I taking it in with every, every.
yeah, we don't see we we see what we see with.
Yeah.
So if we're conditioned to see our own brokenness, we will see that in the people around us. If we allow ourselves to see our own brilliance, we then begin to see the brilliance of others. And so it really behooves us all to start seeing ourselves through new eyes, to see ourselves through a new lens so that
So
we can see
beautiful.
others with the same. Yeah.
So beautiful. It's very related to, we have a mentor who talks about this. He calls it the reticular activation system, that
Yes.
when we buy a blue Honda, all of a sudden we see blue Hondas everywhere. Is it because everybody went out and bought the same car on the same day? No, it's because our awareness,
Right.
right? And so if we start looking for those kinds of things, we see them in places,
Yes.
right?
A hundred
That's
percent. A hundred
We
percent.
see
What
through
we see with.
what we see with. Oh,
Yes.
whew, that one hit me. That was a good one. That's wow. That's I am so I feel so blessed and honored, and in a way, I feel so badly for Sean that he was not that technology prevented, and maybe there's a reason for it, but technology prevented him from joining this conversation. But I know he's going to be fascinated watching it again. Suzy, I am honored really to be in this conversation with you, and for all that you have done over the last 30 years and continue to do, and be a, to be a guiding light for those who are looking at different ways to communicate and other ways to experience life. I really thank you so much for being on our podcast today. This has been fascinating.
Thanks for having me.
Really
It's
been
been a lot of fun.
enjoyable.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad. I say when I always end the show, I always say, empathy and love is, needed more today than ever. And I think every day it seems more and more. So, I always tell people to be empathetic. You never know what somebody's going through, what their experience is,
Right.
our rush to judgment, be more curious. Isn't that Walt Whitman said, be more curious than judgmental? Thanks, Ted
Right.
Lasso.
Yes.
Right. And if you look at the world through lenses of love, the world's just a much better place. There's a movie coming out, Lucid. I think it's about lucid dreams. I don't know if
Oh,
you've seen trailers for this,
I
but
haven't.
a little bit of tapping into lucid dreams. And there's been a lot of discussion lately about the CIA program that allowed folks who have the ability to travel and see other things. This is becoming more in our consciousness, feels like, and hitting the mainstream more and more because of warriors like you who are out there, helping others tap into this oneness. And bless you for all that. It's really amazing. Thank you again for everybody who's listening. Hope that you've got some value out of today's conversation. Please share this with other folks. I generally thank, we thank Billy Footwear. He's always been a friend and sponsor of the show. And the story of Billy Price, the CEO, is fascinating. They create adaptive footwear for people who have, of all abilities and all ages, they've created adaptive footwear to allow people to put their shoes on. This seems like a simple task, yet it can be very difficult. So thanks to Billy. And for those who are interested in joining our men's support group for fathers of children with special needs issues, it's called The Den. We'll put it in the show notes and link to it. It's free. Every 2 weeks we get together on Zoom and share for dads who may feel left out of the conversation. As just two dads, we get it. And by the way, we share emotions and we share everything because that is who we are. So please join us on The Den, and thank you for listening. Again, we know that you have a lot of choices when you're listening to podcasts, so we really appreciate it. From Sean Francis, he always says, let's be more childish and let's be more childlike and less childish. So yeah, I can't even say it as well as Sean. And Suzy, for those folks, again, listening, SuzyMiller.com, SuzyMiller.com, and her book, Awesomeism. We didn't even talk about, we have another book coming out. Maybe that'll give us an opportunity to have another conversation when Sean is here, when that book gets released. I'm so fascinated by what you do and really who you are, Suzy. So thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again in another episode of Just Two Dads.